contribute to multilateralism. And then the third point, last point, is that the UN hopes that global institutions are more accountable and fair, so that they give voice and decision-making power to the people who are actually impacted by global change. So that's the official view of the General Assembly on the reform process. In terms of just the last observation on where we are in reforming the UN Security Council. Colleagues are probably aware that the Security Council is the only international body that has a mandated authority to raise troops and to deploy them to secure regional peace and security. They can mobilize an army and they can deploy that army. As I said, there are 5 permanent members of the Security Council and a rotating number of 10 countries. But it's the permanent 5 that all have to agree before troops are dispersed. Those 5 members, of course, are the United States, China, Britain, France, and the UK. I would like to pick up on the doctor's point, on Dr. Dieter's point about why we really are having a problem with this. Although we have sensible formulas for enlarging the council, it will of course require that one of the countries, or 2 of the countries, which have that right now, to raise an army and to deploy it in defense of regional peace and security, will lose their position. There is one country on the Security Council for which there is absolutely no doubt they don't belong. Of course, to be on the Security Council, you must have an independent military capability. And there is an obvious country which quite clearly does not have that. For that country to agree in the change in the Security Council would recognize an existential step that very few countries in the history of the modern period since the French Revolution have ever taken. I think all of us that work for the UN in a bureaucratic capacity would be stunned to see that happen. What I think that means for us in looking at reform is that we either go to the unprecedented moment where a country not defeated in a war recognizes that it is no longer in a position to dictate the rules of the game. Again, give one historical example of where it's happened. You can't, because it hasn't. Or we have to spend a very long time talking to each other about a very complex new set of seats at a table. I'd like to thank ICRIER and others for allowing the UN to be part of this discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa. And I just want to take a couple of minutes, if you would bear with me, for this vote of thanks. We started this conference 2 nights ago, with Montek talking about the G20 and its relevance, and probably reinventing itself in some way. And we've ended the conference probably similarly, looking at the international monetary system and the international governance framework and the need for it to perhaps reinvent itself. And we had both views at the end. You can look at it as a glass half full or as a glass half empty. But we all know, especially those of us who've lived and worked in India, we know that institutional reform is perhaps the slowest to take place. It happens in India particularly slowly, and probably at the international level even more slowly. So it's the speed is glacial, and our institutions haven't kept up with our growth. And perhaps it'll be unfair to expect that the international monetary and international governance system will reflect the new realities in a swift or in an efficient manner. So probably we have to give the institution time to reflect the new realities or to reorient themselves, because as Lisa just concluded, it would be the first time in history that something like that happens with the UN Security Council. But I think we've had an extraordinarily good performance, and those of you who've stayed back for 2 days would have learned a lot, I presume, and thank you for doing that. Not only people who are here, but a lot of people have contributed to the success of this conference. I think it's been extremely successful. let me just start by thanking not only the speakers and the people who've come from far, but also our sponsors who've helped us with the conference, both financially as well as intellectually in the planning stages for this conference. The World Bank, CAS, and the Australian government. There were representatives from the Australian G20 team here yesterday, Barry Sterlin, who I'd like to specially mention because he made the trip specially to come here and speak at our conference. He's the finance deputy, and we'll probably be seeing more of him in the Brisbane and the Sydney conferences, and those of you who travel for those conferences will probably see him. Finally, I would like to thank all the speakers, and thank you so much for coming, but spare a moment to thank and applaud the organizers of this conference, not me, not ICRIER, but the team within ICRIER, I think, has done a splendid job. And they're all sitting there at the back, and if you turn your back and just applaud them for the wonderful work. There are many who are not there, but the ones who are there, Sirjan, Shaun, Manmeet, Rajkumar, Kishan, they've all done a splendid job, and sitting outside, manning the desks, Neha, Rajesh, Jeet, and I think they've done a splendid job. So thank you very much, and thank you all of you for making our 6th annual G20 conference a big success. Thank you.